Welcome back. I'm Tian Wei, and you're watching World Insight. Within days of a global spike in COVID-19 cases, medical masks quickly became one of the most needed commodities, being snapped up online and offline around the world. As viral infections swell, it has led to global shortages of medical supplies. So some countries decided to send supplies to those who need them the most. Masks have become to be viewed as a gesture of big goodwill. For more about the so-called mask diplomacy, joining us in Washington, D.C., Chen Li, a director and senior fellow at the John Thornton China Center at the Brookings Institution. Dr. Chen, welcome to our program. You didn't wear a mask today in Washington, D.C.?
No, actually, that's probably still politically incorrect to wear a mask. I think this is certainly worrisome. But so it's not in this area. Maybe some part of the U.S. people start to wear masks, but in Washington, D.C., still hardly see anyone to wear a mask.
Not wearing a mask yet, and yet you've been thinking about mask and mask diplomacy. Recently, you wrote an article together with your colleague about how diplomacy is taking place between China and Japan through the mask. Tell us how that works.
Well, the generous gifting of masks between China and Japan and it's really fascinating phenomenon. This phenomenon is spontaneous, widely spread, reflecting both the top-down and the bottom-up in terms of both government and the public, both NGOs and the corporations. In a way, it's very, very moving because both countries, especially early on Japan, they also need a mask, but they just selflessly send a huge amount to China. And there are certain things that I wanted to mention. I think this really, the exchange of masks has taken to a new level of goodwill. Now, here are the examples. First, the Japanese leadership, the LDP members, they actually voted to donate 5,000 yen to China to fight the outbreak of the virus. And also the numerous organizations, I mean, reflect really multi-generations, they send so many boxes to China of the masks. And in many of the boxes, they mark the ancient poem, a very powerful line, lands apart, sky shared. This certainly, I mean, Chinese social media react very positively. They love that poem. And also that the famous Tokyo-based Matsuyama ballet group, and were filmed and staged singing the songs to cheer Chinese people. And also in return, Jack Ma, China's richest man, also committed $15 million to help Japan to fight coronavirus, and also donated 1 million masks to Japan. So this is really a wonderful story, and I think there's a lot of stories could be found, and that certainly improved relationship in a very dramatic way.
Dr. Li, fascinating stuff what you have just said over there. It reminds me of the earlier conversation we had on our show today regarding the economy. So the question really is, are we going to look at the world now very differently because of COVID-19 and its possible impact on how we live, we think about ourselves, and how we think about our relationship with the others, this time through the masks, it seems, Dr. Li?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, it's often said a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. You know, I'm a little bit hesitant to say that, to consider the huge cost and the death. But there's a message that the people learn lessons from crisis. And this makes people realize we are really living in the same world. And the poem I just mentioned reflected that. A friend of mine at the People's University, Wang Yuwei, said, win all or lose all in this global pandemic. So that revelation is extremely important. Unfortunately, that we learn that lesson in a hard way. I mean, particularly those people really do not pay too much attention to this crisis. Actually, in your last program a month ago, I already quote Bill Gates, he told us really 5 years ago that it's not just our system is imperfect or have problem, but we simply do not have system to deal with this kind of widespread pandemic, the virus. So I think this should be a wake-up call. Fortunately, China and Japan really learned that lesson early on, and I think that I hope that will also teach people elsewhere.
Focusing on the China-Japan story, Dr. Li, as you may recall, you also mentioned in your article, in fact, that the relationship between China and Japan was not being mended only with the test of COVID-19, but rather over the past few years, we've seen a sharp rise, actually, of Chinese students in Japan and the other way around as well. Meanwhile, sharp rise of Chinese tourists going to Japan too, and at the same time, more interactions among the business sectors between the two sides, the private sectors. So all of this seems to be paving a way for a very natural goodwill gestures from both sides now, Dr. Li.
Well, absolutely. As we know that Japan and China is the most problematic relationship in the world. It has been caught up with historical grievance and deep-rooted mistrust, and also still unresolved territory disputes. And also there's some competition may not be so friendly and etc. Now, but all these things now put aside because we look at the bigger cause, and this reflects not only the best of humanity, but also the realization that we need to fight together with this kind of challenge. So I think that if a relationship such as China and Japan can improve in a drastic way, in a quick way, I think that there's a hope that the other relationship can also improve, no matter what you talk, what relation you talk about that. So that's probably will come out very strongly as a lesson. I hope that, of course, there's some tensions between China and Japan will not disappear overnight. But I think that certainly they give us the term and some of the important goodwill that people will remember. And also, these things, it's not just because virus. Actually, the top leadership, President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Abe, already tried very hard early on. Unfortunately, the summit did not happen, but I think it will resume very soon and after the control of the virus. I think plus the Olympics, and first in Japan and then in winter in China. I think these are all the signs that both countries will move to the right direction. And also the tremendous need for cooperation between the second and the third largest economy in the world.
Certainly. But Dr. Li, while you are talking, it reminds me there are so many different factors in terms of the nature of a relationship, whether it's China and Japan or China and U.S., where you are in Washington, D.C. For example, the role of the media. Now, when you have a public health crisis, the role of the media tends to be more providing information and not creating panic, while at the same time trying to present more human stories in its coverage. It's just a natural way the media does things when it is a public health crisis. So how much of that, what we are seeing today, have to do with how media have been working since the start of this public health crisis? In other days, maybe the media, the only source people got to know about each other from, has been focusing very much on other stories which might not necessarily help the two peoples to be at least being friendly toward one another. So it seems to be very different and complicated factors. Dr. Li, you have much better understanding than I do, I'm sure.
Well, you already mentioned that the media and including the Chinese official and the social media already changed its rhetoric about Japan. That's certainly it's evident that if you look at the programs over the past few weeks in China, similarly, Japan, the public mood also start to change. Now, talking about the United States, because I live here, and certainly there's some kind of demonizing China, point finger China in some of the politicians that certainly want to play that kind of game. But I also want to say that if we look at some other media, that actually they fear. They now think that some politicians it's simply not right to point finger to China, including the CNN coverage last night, because I looked at the election, follow election very, very closely, and Mr. Cuomo in CNN, the anchor person, he said that he hoped that politicians will not just blame everything to China. So that is the mainstream media. But also I noticed that in the past week or so, that the older networks actually no longer just bashing China. Of course, from time to time, you will see some people talk about the Chinese virus or China virus. But we should put it in perspective. I really think most people, they have a goodwill. They maybe do not have too much information. Maybe we need to wait for some time for the mindset change. But certainly, the China-U.S. relation improvement that give us some hope. I think we do not have too many choices before the even bigger disaster.
Now, the fundamental question, Dr. Li, is that you have been a witness to the complicated relations between China and the United States. There are also other important bilateral relations between China and Japan, for example. But will COVID-19 and the afterthoughts we have, if we could go through this time of difficult time, be able to reprioritize what we need to focus on and what can we really focus on? Will that be the trend? I really have a big question mark. What about from analysts like you?
It's a very good question. I think Martin Wolf, a famous reporter for Financial Times, was once asked about a couple of years ago, what could change this kind of hostility between China and the United States. He said, unless the Mars invaded the Earth. Of course, that's a joke. But now we do face the really devastating challenge, the coronavirus. That makes us to think about the possibility for cooperation. I think that the important thing is we do need to emphasize international public good, not just look at the narrow-minded national interests. There are public goods including nuclear non-proliferation, climate change, public health, anti-terrorism, you name it. I think this probably will have profound impact. Maybe I'm a little bit naive or too optimistic, but I think that the debate will also become more dynamic around the world, especially probably in the United States, I hope.
We hope that will be the case. Thank you so much, Dr. Cheng Li from the Brookings Institution. All the best and be healthy. And that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, you can try to search our program, World Insight, into your search engine, or check out our YouTube channel, our Twitter and Facebook accounts. From me, Tian Wei, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching. Bye for now.